Now, interestingly enough, when this is called Hinduphobia, it's knocked down, or you're making up something. But research by Australian student and activist Sarah Gates has found the term Hinduphobia actually dates back to 1863 at least, yeah?
Yes,
And I'm sure it's some similar terms were like Hinduphobia around before that. It's being knocked down, yeah? But does it have some basis if it was mentioned so often? Is it something that Western culture with roots in Christianity and monotheism finds rather deplorable about it and can't understand it? And that's why it reacts in the way it does.
Yeah. Well, that is quite obvious that hatred of Hinduism already exists since a very long time. And so there were different motives for it. So in the case of Christians, it was a very strong hatred, not necessarily of Hindus, but of Hinduism. And indeed, the way they themselves justify it to themselves is that they don't hate Hindus. On the contrary, they love Hindus. They love them so much that they want them to go to heaven rather than to hell. And therefore they have to convert. See, I'm giving you a present of the true religion. Huh?
And the secularists are basically inherit that mantle.
Yes, they certainly inherit the mantle of trying to do good for you, imposing the good on you even if you are reluctant. But of course they have a different motive by now, which is mainly that of social justice. So they see India as the paragon of self-righteous inequality because of their religion, supposedly intrinsically casteist. They keep on defending the whole idea of inequality. Now, that's not exactly true in the sense that in the Vedas there was no caste system. Then you see it gradually evolving, and so for the last about 1800 years you have the full division of the Indian population into box types, communities called here castes. And now that's waning again. Now you see plenty of intercaste marriages. So caste is not intrinsic to Hinduism, but yes, it has been in place for a long time. And so for people who get to know India, like the first colonizers, they tend to identify caste with Hinduism.
And one of the things they've done is this, which is interesting. The left think India's this sort of horrible cesspit of inequality. One thing you put in there is, because these Aryans invaded and they imposed racial apartheid and created the caste system. And they have a situation now where if you oppose the Aryan invasion theory, you're called a Hindu fundamentalist, a right-wing populist fascist. Yet if you support a theory which Hitler actually supported and the far right support, you're called an anti-racist.
Yes.
You know, ironically, wasn't it when German romancists like Schlegel looked at India, did they not think Aryans actually came out of it, not into it?
Yeah, of course. The out of India theory is the original homeland theory. You see, there is nowadays a very funny notion that this is an invention by Hindu nationalists. Well, it's not even really an invention. The thought came naturally to them when they saw the central position of Sanskrit. They naturally thought that, well, you see, India must be the homeland. And so that was Europeans. And so all the big names in the first century were all European. And so it is they who cultivated this out of India theory. Then a few people started thinking, well, maybe not. And so the breakthrough came in 1834 with August Schlegel, the brother of Friedrich Schlegel, who was a great Indomaniac. But so he proposed the Caucasus, or the flatlands just north of it, as the homeland. And so within 10-20 years that had become the orthodoxy, which was fought by Europeans living in India. And so at that point there were still no Hindu participants in the debate. And like most Indians who would have objected to it and pointed to scripture and so on, didn't even know English, and didn't know what that debate was about and so on. So this was just an affair among Europeans. Now, the people living in India, like there are several Sanskrit professors, Europeans teaching Sanskrit in Indian universities. And then most remarkably, a colonialist par excellence, namely Mount Stewart Elphinstone, who had been the governor of Bombay. So later in life he became active as a historian, wrote the history of India. And so just then, the Aryan invasion theory was coming up, and he argued against it. He said, look, you see in the Vedas, the Manusmriti and so on, there is nowhere any indication that the Hindus came from elsewhere. And so he was strongly not convinced that these were people in India who held out with the out of India theory has a psychological explanation. So, I mean, these ideologies of racism and so on, at that point, they're not important. Racism became a big factor like 20 years after that. But at any rate, it was not the reason why there was this shift and why the people in India held out defending the out of India theory. You see, when you're in India, you see how big it is. And in Europe, first of all, the status of India was declining from some miraculous country in the distance where they traded diamonds and gold and spices. It became just a mere colony. So that's certainly a psychological factor. Another one is very simple, very physical. The maps people use. You see, you have different kinds of projections to get a round surface on a square page.
MacArthur scale, yeah.
Yes, and so the MacArthur one is designed for navigators. And so, you see, maps are fun, but you see, when you're in the middle of the ocean, you really need it. And so it was designed specially for them. And so that preserved the angles, but not the surfaces. And so you get the situation that Scandinavia on the map looks far bigger than India, whereas India is bigger than Europe as a whole. And so it became easy to sort of relegate India to the side and, proceed with history as if India wasn't really there. Whereas if you're in India, you're just impressed with the magnitude of India. And everybody knew since the beginning that the Indo-European languages had crossed a racial frontier, either from white to brown or from brown to white. But at any rate, you couldn't identify it with a race. That was obvious since the beginning. And so this racial identification came later in the 1850s, 1860s, and became totally center stage when the evolution theory of Charles Darwin had become known. So from then on, you see, race was all over the place. Like Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, like at the height of colonialism, said that race is the key to all of history. So then till 1940-45, this remained the overarching paradigm.
Well, how come they can't change it now, even the textbooks in India? I mean, the Western academics are all totally brainwashed, that's understandable. You've got a BJP government, supposedly Hindu nationalist government, in power. Couldn't they start to change textbooks? Other countries have done this,
Yes.
There's no reason why India can't do it.
Well, the most positive explanation is that they want to be scientifically sure of their case. And so as long as big professors in Harvard or so keep on defending the Aryan invasion theory, they don't want to change too much, they don't want to go too much against the orthodoxy, the established position. Especially maybe after learning the lesson of the 2006 California textbook affair. You see, back then, Hindus had gone too far in asserting that the Aryan invasion theory was a bygone thing, that it had been disproven and so on. Well, maybe in some air-conditioned library hall, this has been disproven, but in terms of the textbooks and so on the world over, the Aryan invasion theory is still very much in place. And so they didn't know exactly what was going on in that debate. And so they pushed the Hindu viewpoint, and that provoked a reaction. And so, in a sense, the Modi government is wise to not move on it until there is real certainty. And so that's in fact what we are working on. You see, trying to really finish that debate.